Hey guys, what's up? Welcome back to the channel, and today we're going to talk about Kitty Pryde. Now, originally I was going to wait until I had her at tier 2, but there's two separate reasons why I think doing a tier 1 sort of review first impression of her is important, is because for one, I didn't actually get to play with her much at all, if at all, during the APK, and I just saw her as sort of a leadership character. And for two, having her at tier 1 and being able to test that will really answer the question of if you should even bother with Kitty Pryde if you're not going to take her to tier 2, because you'll be able to see her limitations at tier 1. Now, since Kitty Pryde is an X-Gene daily subscription character, she falls under the same category as characters like Nick Fury, Ghost Panther, Sentinel, etc. So it is really important, although a lot of these characters only come into their own at tier 2, especially when it comes to support characters like Nick Fury and Ghost Panther, because they get that tier 2 passive. In the case of Sentinel, he makes a strong case for himself, or itself, because of the universal villain tag, and also because the clones will do full damage at tier 2, even though their master, the original Sentinel, your Sentinel, is tier 1. So even though you summon them in a high level Shadowland stage, like let's say stage 30, they can actually clear it, the clones. But in Kitty's case, she cannot go past stage 24 of Shadowland, as regular tier 1 characters can't for the vast majority of the time. And so because of that, well, I mean, you could go past stage 24 because, you know, Lockheed can do some damage, but let's be honest, Lockheed's not going to do any damage. I wanted to see basically what can you expect to get out of a tier 1 Kitty. Now, as a tier 1 character, she still has one of the best leaderships in the game. It is mutant only, but it's 55% all attack with a 6% crit rate, so that is ginormous. And as a speed type, that is a very strong leadership. If you go through and you check out of all the speed types in Marvel Future Fight, you will not be surprised if you're someone like me and you know most speed type characters have really shit leaderships. They have leaderships that give you like dodge or all attack or all speed or debuff reduction. It's just really garbage leaderships from top to bottom. There's only a handful of characters that have a leadership even worth a damn, and even the ignore dodge leaderships like Spider-Man 2099 are only very situationally useful to begin with. So having a speed character with an all-attack leadership is extremely rare, and then having one as high as plus 55 with the 6% crit, I know it only applies to mutants, and mutants only make up a fraction of the total roster. It's like 20% or less, but it's still a huge deal. But outside of the leadership, what are you really getting from Kitty? Well, sadly, the answer is at tier 1, not much. So I do want to put that out there and caution you guys, if you are going to get Kitty but you're not going to be able to take her to tier 2, tread carefully, tread lightly, because the tier 2 passive, although it doesn't give a lot, it does seem to bump her up in ways that she needs, especially that guaranteed dodge. She's an extremely fragile character, and so we're going to go over my build, and I'm going to tell you what I think off the bat. I did give her already, and this is something you should never do, so this is a case study in what not to do when building a character in Marvel Future Fight. I gave her Uru before I amplified. The reason why this is bad is because it could take me, an unusual number of amplification attempts before I get all 3 of those 5-star on the first 2 gears, Yellow Gloves and X-Suit, amplified. Now, generally you go for 4 out of 5 amplifications because it's the most cost effective in terms of the power that you gain, but also the amount of gold that you invest into each character. But again, there's only a, whatever % chance that I actually land on those 3 plus one of the last remaining 2. So this is actually quite a risky idea, and I might end up spending extra gold that I wouldn't otherwise spend, but I did so because I wanted to boost her damage at tier 1 to see if it's any good at all, because she does have pretty high stats for a speed type in general, and also to try to shore up some of her ignore defense, because it is low. She is missing a uniform, and sadly she is also missing these stats from her overall build, because she doesn't give herself any of those other stats that you would expect. Now, she does have skill cooldown here on her first stat, which is good, which means she does get a lot of skill cooldown from her gear, but she doesn't have ignore defense, so you have to roll ignore defense on her 4th gear almost 100% of the time, unless you have crazy amounts on your cards, but even then I'm over 30%, and I still have to roll it, and I have Power of Angry Hulk as well. Power of Angry Hulk I do think is the best set for her. She really only gives herself 1 buff with the 5th skill for 25% all attack and a bunch of other, meaningless 1% buffs. The all defense buffs that she has do not apply to World Boss, so this is basically just all PvP type stuff and Shadowland type stuff. Surging Shadows, you'll see, is a really awkward and really dangerous skill, but it does give her an accumulation for damage dealt to the enemy, so it doesn't matter if they hit you or not, it's about how much damage you do to the enemy, which is generally much much better and much safer. As far as the rest of the build goes, I've got her type enhancement obviously at rank 0. We got stage 6 Power Vanguard Hulk, and then we've got a crit damage 140 proc. Not too amazing, but I want you to be able to see what kind of damage she can put out at tier 1 with this sort of build. And I'm already in the top 1600, so this tells me that not many people are playing Kitty in general. But I don't blame them for not playing Kitty, because on top of having 0, that's right, 0 skills that offer her any type of protection. I'm talking buffs to her dodge. I'm talking invincibility, immunity, you know, anything like that. Even a guard hit is completely removed. And I think this is the first argument in favor of the idea that they are purposely making X-Men characters weaker to give them room for a uniform in the future. And this is something that we'll talk about in a later video as a general theme for the entire video, and I can put more evidence up in that individual video. I don't want to crowd Kitty Pryde's video with conspiracy theories, but I do think that Kitty is a prime example of a character who they just gave a generic uniform to, and they're going to give her a uniform in the future that's more fleshed out. Perhaps you'll see Lockheed in the uniform the entire time. He won't just pop up during the actual gameplay, and then that uniform will be a much more fleshed out, much more robust, sort of balanced version of the character, because I think this one right now is extremely imbalanced, and obviously it's imbalanced towards being shitty, not being overpowered. And you know, you think back to the live stream, and Cage and Karen were saying that the dev notes were saying that Kitty Pryde is meant for PvP. Well, the Fracture, you could argue, is for PvP, despite it only being 5 seconds. Yeah, it's pretty nice. But I gotta say, guys, giving her intermittent iframes and not giving her any skills with any sort of invincibility or immunity is a pretty bold way of saying that this character is for PvP. Now, yes, a lot of characters in Marvel Future Fight have penetration, which makes immunity and invincibility much less valuable, but then you have to compensate for that for PvP. You either have to come in with crazy healing, like someone, you know, Thanos, Deadpool, Wolverine, Jean Grey's third skill, or you need to have long, uninterruptible iframes, to which Kitty only has 1, or you need to have insane amounts of guaranteed dodge a la Ant-Man and Quicksilver. And guess what? Ant-Man and Quicksilver still have very long, uninterruptible iframes on their 4th skills. Guess what Kitty doesn't have? A lot of guaranteed dodge. She has 25%, which is basically the lowest amount that they give nowadays, and is, you know, it's the amount that they gave characters back in 2016 when they were first handing out tier 2 passives. So I really don't understand the idea. I think she should at least have 50% guaranteed dodge. She's intangible, for God's sakes. Who the hell is going to hit her? How does she not have higher dodge? How does she not have immunity to physical damage when she literally cannot be physically hit by the vast majority of enemies that she faces? Anyways, moving on to actual gameplay here, we're going to show off a stage 20 of Shadowland. Now, her rotation is very tight, and her rotation is also pretty strange. Now, the one good thing about Kitty that I can say, besides her leadership's great. The only other thing that's good about Kitty is her 5th skill. It is a long iframe, it is a self buff, and it is an immediate iframe. So you don't have to worry at all. You will immediately go into iframe. However, after this, you have to do 2 for the crowd control, and then you do 3 for the buff, and then you immediately go into 5. So it's a really dangerous rotation. As you can see, I lost a whole bunch of HP right at the beginning because I didn't catch all 3 characters in the rotation. We're gonna go back and start over, but basically, here's the bad news for Kitty. Her 4th skill is garbage. It's garbage because it's not an iframe throughout. It's a little bit of iframe in the middle and a little bit of iframe at the end. But at the beginning and somewhere in the middle towards the end, there's no iframe. So we're just going to start off with the 4th skill so you can see how horseshit this skill really is. Are you guys ready? No iframe here, then iframe, then no iframe, then back to iframe. You know what? I didn't get hit that many times, but I honestly got lucky. In other cases, you'll get one-shotted by the boss, especially if we're talking World Boss Ultimate. Her 1st skill, I probably don't have to tell you, also garbage. So yes, it does have an iframe in the beginning, but the damage is low, and it's just not worth it. So taking her 4th skill out of the rotation because it's too dangerous and too risky and too inconsistent, and taking her 1st skill out, you're basically left with 5, 3, and 2. Now, you want to do 5 because it's a full iframe, it's a great skill for self-buffing, and it's just got a whole bunch of different effects. So 5 is great, so open with 5. You want to do 3, because it's got the accumulation, and you need that accumulation. You can technically cancel 3 pretty early on, but the beginning of 3 is not an iframe. So it's hugely risky. I don't understand why they didn't give her 3 seconds or 2 seconds of immunity at the beginning of her 3rd skill. It would have made her a much more complete character. But because of the reason that 3 is not an iframe at the beginning, we open with 2 to get that fear, and then the end of the 3rd skill is an iframe. So you're basically doing 5th skill full iframe, and then 2 skill for the fear there, and then 3 skill, and you can see the end of the 3rd skill is a complete iframe. So you're basically having to use that 2nd skill because at the very beginning of her 2nd skill, unlike 4 and unlike 1, she applies a fear and I believe a stun as well. So you use that opportunity to create a window where you're basically immune to damage because the enemies are being feared and stunned. And you can see there's a 1 second stun and a 3 second fear. You use that window to start the 3rd skill, and it's got a long ass wind up before she actually starts the iframe because she has to take out her katanas and she's got to look all pretty. And you can actually even see it in the skill preview. It's not the 1st skill, but it's this 2nd skill. So this is the animation for her 3rd skill. She whips out the katanas and then she goes into her iframe. When she disappears, that's the beginning of the iframe. But you can just sit here and you can count the seconds. You can count the breaths. And just imagine that in between that, Kitty is dead, because that's exactly what's going to happen to your Kitty if you actually try to pull off her 3rd skill without setting yourself up the way that I did. So it's really, really dumb. It's obviously not up to par. It's obviously not equally as good as characters that have been released throughout the year that have similar situations. It's just completely nonsense to have a character that costs money like this and has such glaring weaknesses, like obvious need for buffs. So again, I just don't understand if it's something about the X-Men that Netmarble just doesn't want to get right on the first pass because the X-Men have so many cool uniforms. So like, you know what, we're not going to get it right this time, but we'll get it right the next time with the first uniform. Or if it's something, you know, is it that deliberate or is it just something accidental? Because you go and you compare it to someone like Molten Man. And Molten Man was a villain who was free to play, who was introduced just a couple of updates ago. And you look at his kit, and you see that he's got a long iframe on 5 with a much better self buff of all attack and crit rate. Not to mention the fear and the stun and the bind. Don't even mention that. But then on top of that, he's got the 3rd skill, which also applies immunity, I believe, for 3 or 4 seconds. It's not listed here, but it does apply immunity. And you've got his 2nd skill, which applies a 2-second paralysis that works against world bosses and you know, other things. Of course, Shadowland, it works. Everything works on Shadowland. But you have this like a completely different character. Yes, he's got a skill like 4 and 1 where there's no iframe, sure. But when you've got a long iframe on 5, you've got paralysis that works on every single enemy in the game on, you know, for 2 seconds on the 2 skill, and then you've also got immunity on the 3rd skill. And then you say, well, what the hell happened? Oh, on top of that, he's got a 45% attack, 45% defense buff for 10 seconds. That's a free-to-play character. This is a character that people are actually paying money for. Again, I don't want Netmarble to go the route of, you know, pay money, get the better character by default. Pay to win is obviously not something that I want to push, but this is absurd. There is no reason why Kitty should have 0 skills with any sort of immunity or invincibility, and then you guys have the attitude or whatever, the audacity to tell us that it's a PvP character. On what planet is she a PvP character? Let me tell you right now, she's not a PvP character. There is no PvP character in Marvel Future Fight that has 1 instant iframe and no other abilities that heal and such low guaranteed dodge. I can guarantee you that you're going to dodge this character at tier 2 unless you're just a huge Kitty Pryde fan, or you just have to have all the X-Men tier 2, or you're a content creator like me and you have to max out all the characters for your roster anyways. So I am quite disappointed. The more I think about it, the more it pisses me off in Kitty Pryde, and I honestly do, I mean, again, just like Cyclops and Emma Frost, if I were the devs at Netmarble, I would be thinking about patching this character and throwing on, you know, a 3-second immunity, a 4-second invincibility, something, buffing up her guaranteed dodge as well. You know, she basically needs more guaranteed dodge, I think, at this point, and she needs a skill with immunity or invincibility. I think it's asinine, completely asinine, to give her a skill that has accumulation that doesn't apply right at the beginning of the skill. It does apply, but it takes some time, and not making that skill an iframe at the beginning. It makes absolutely no sense. There are plenty of other characters. Ulysses Claw, for Christ's sakes. He has an iframe skill where he jumps out of a car So the beginning of the skill is an iframe because he shoots in the car. Sure, the car is driving really fast, it's an iframe, fine. But the end of the skill, okay, the end of speeding, explosive speeding, you can check it out in the skill preview. He gets out of the car and he walks towards you, and that's a fucking iframe. And they couldn't give Kitty an iframe at the beginning when she's taking out her swords. This X-Men female leader who's literally intangible. I have no words for that amount of bullshittery. Anyways, guys, let me know what you think of Kitty Pryde. Let me know if you're ranking her up or not. I'm obviously going to be getting her to tier 2. Hopefully, she really wows me at tier 2 because she does do things that speed types normally don't do. She has very high speed type base stats, some of the highest in the game, and she has a really strong leadership, which is very unusual for speed types. However, as her own kit, I am extremely disappointed in everything except her 5th skill. So let me know what you guys think. Subscribe if you enjoy the content and you want to support me. And of course, if you like what you see, I hope to see you again tomorrow. Take care.